A mother and her partner are found guilty over the brutal death of a toddler. One-year-old Noah Sarah Morrison died of a massive head injury and suffered multiple fractures. His mother caused or allowed his death. Her partner was convicted of murder. Also this lunchtime, Lloyds Bank culls a further 300 jobs and doubles branch closures to 400. They blame online banking and a post-Brexit profit squeeze.
There has never been a man or a woman more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as President of the United States of America.
What's mine should be yours. Obama throws his weight behind Hillary Clinton to take over at the White House. And the anniversary gift sung on the streets of Liverpool that's touched the country.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. 13-month-old Noah Sarah Morrison was beaten so badly by his mother's partner he died from massive head trauma. The court was told the toddler's fatal injury was caused by him being slammed against a hard surface. Noah's mother was found guilty of causing or allowing his death by willful neglect. Her partner, Hardeep Punjan, was convicted of his murder. They tried to cover up his death, claiming he'd fallen out of his cot. The police said it was a case of sheer malice and utter cruelty, and that Noah had experienced fear, pain, neglect and extreme brutality. You may find some of the details in Nina Nana's report. Distressing.
Oh yeah, you're liking the water, aren't you?
He is beaming, happy at play, but Noah's life would be ended horrifically, murdered at 13 months old because, said the police, he had become an inconvenience. Today, his mother's partner, 27-year-old Hardeep Punjan, was found guilty of murder and cruelty. Noah's mother, 22-year-old Ronnie Taylor Morrison, was found not guilty of murder but convicted for cruelty and allowing her son's death.
Please, can you hurry up and come? My son isn't breathing. He's been out of his cot and he's not breathing.
This was the call Taylor Morrison made to paramedics last November, blaming a fall from his cot for Noah's death. But he had in fact suffered horrific abuse in the weeks leading up to his death. 24 bone fractures, including to his skull, consistent with being violently swung against a wall or floor. This footage shows his mother drinking from a child's mug emblazoned with Winnie the Pooh while taking drugs with Punjan. Theirs was a relationship, the court heard, fuelled by drugs and alcohol.
It's the toxic relationship that these two coming together that has caused his death. It's a relationship which is fueled on drugs and cannabis taking, alcohol, abuse, some violence, and ultimately this relationship becomes more important to them than 13-month-old Noah, who becomes an inconvenience to them.
2 days after Noah's murder, Taylor Morrison and Punjan were caught on CCTV shopping before boarding a coach heading for Scotland. But they would not escape justice. Nina Nana, ITV News.
And Russell Hookey is outside the court in Luton live for us this lunchtime. Russell, has there been any reaction from Noah's family to these verdicts?
Well, yes, in court today here in Luton, there was an audible gasp of relief from baby Noah's father, Stefano Koyana. He, along with his family, have sat through this 6-week trial and had to maintain their composure as they faced Hardeep Punjan and Ronnie Taylor Morrison across the court. They've described baby Noah as someone who completed their life and made them happy, and they watched as those verdicts were delivered, and the pair held their heads in their hands. Now, Noah's paternal family and many others, of course, are now asking how two people whose lives revolved around drugs and alcohol could have been allowed to continue caring for such a vulnerable child. A serious case review has been confirmed to examine the contact all agencies had with them prior to Noah's death.
Russell, thank you. Now, in other news, as more of us do our banking online, we can expect to see fewer bank branches on the high street. That was Lloyd's logic as they announced 3,000 more job losses and a doubling of branch closures. The chief executive also warned of a future profit squeeze as Brexit prompts what he called a deceleration in growth. Last year's profits, however, doubled at the bank the taxpayer owns 9% of. That was mainly due to a fall-off in payment protection penalties. Nick Wallace has more.
Is this the first concrete effect of Brexit on jobs and communities? Today, Lloyds Bank told its customers that the likely economic slowdown caused by the EU referendum is one of the reasons behind its decision. Union leaders vowed to fight any compulsory redundancies.
Well, on behalf of Unite members, we're devastated by this announcement. Lloyds Banking Group have cut tens of thousands of jobs over the last few years. This is a battered and beleaguered workforce, and there seems to be no end in sight for the jobs cull.
Under the new plans, 3,000 jobs will be lost and 200 branches will close. This is on top of plans to cut 9,000 staff and another 200 branches. Today, Lloyds also announced a £2.5 billion pre-tax profit in the first half of this year. So why does the bank feel the need to make these cuts?
There's definitely some speculation around today that the Brexit vote is what has pushed through these job losses and bank closures. But I think this is probably more a long-term trend that's been going on for years and years. Lloyds is now servicing 60% of its customers' needs online, and that probably means it has to reduce its high street presence.
For customers, it all depends on whether you're a fan of the move to digital banking.
I still like to talk to someone in person rather than use internet banking.
I do most of my banking online, so if it does close, it's not the biggest deal for me, I guess.
There's no doubt the referendum result has cast a considerable amount of uncertainty over Britain's banking sector. You've also got the prospect of interest rates reducing next week, which could hit banks' profitability still further. Many of us are switching to online and mobile banking, which all leaves branches like this looking vulnerable. In more rural communities, the prospect of losing what might be the last branch in a town or village could have a very real effect on local economies. Nick Wallace, ITV News.
And Duncan Golestani is live in Southborough in Kent for us this lunchtime. Duncan, the Lloyds where you are is not going to be there much longer.
That's right, Alistair. This branch of Lloyds Bank is going to close for the final time at 2 o'clock. It is the last bank in town, and that expression, last bank in town, it really does mean something, because back in 2008, the high street banks promised not to close the last branch in any community, but many of them have gone back on that. I want to talk now to one of the local campaigners who fought to keep this Lloyds open. You haven't succeeded, and what you're about to go through, many more communities will do. How are you feeling today?
We feel completely let down in Southborough. This is a financial institution which has provided a good service to local people, and now they are going to have to jump on a bus or jump in their car and try to find a parking place at another branch.
Of course, we're told many more of us are using our apps, we're banking online, that we don't need to go into these places.
Well, tell that to elderly people who may not have access to the internet, or even if they do, I'll feel very uncomfortable about trying to transact their business online and want to speak to somebody physically to do business. Tell that to local businesses or local churches who need to deposit or withdraw large amounts of cash.
Joe, thank you very much for talking to us this lunchtime. So what's about to happen to this community, to this bank, is going to be experienced much more wider across the UK in the year to come.
Indeed. Duncan and your guest, thank you both very much. French energy giant EDF is poised to announce its long-awaited decision on the planned nuclear power station at Hinkley Point. The company's board is meeting in Paris right now. It is expected to give the go-ahead to the £18 billion project, and it would be the first nuclear power station to be built in the United Kingdom for decades. But there have been protests this morning against the plans, with environmental groups instead calling for homegrown, renewable energy like offshore wind farms. Well, our business editor, Joel Hills, is at the proposed site in Somerset for us this lunchtime. That meeting taking place right now, Joel, but this decision, it's a slam dunk. It's going to happen.
It will be a shock, Alistair, if it doesn't. This is a prestige project for EDF, and the British government says it's in our national interest. As it stands, 1/5 of the electricity we use is generated by nuclear power stations like Hinkley B behind me, which is hooked up to the national grid. But the fleet is ageing, and a Labour government back in 2006 decided it wanted the whole lot replaced and upgraded. It has taken this long to get so far, 10 years. When Hinkley C is finally built, it's going to take 9 years, and that price tag is hefty. It will be the first nuclear station to be built since 1995. It's a monster. It will generate around 7% of the electricity we need, but that price tag is hefty. The technology is unproven. Now, EDF is shouldering the upfront costs, but the consumer ultimately will pay. When it's hooked up to the grid, expect energy bills, the government says, to rise by around £10 a year. Now, for some, that is not good value for money.
As an independent observer of this contract, it's difficult to say that it's going to be a good deal for the UK consumer. At the moment, it looks like a very expensive way of delivering what the government wants us to deliver, which is reliable electricity at zero carbon.
We've heard lots of protests, but presumably as a massive infrastructure project, this is good for the economy overall.
Look, there are undoubtedly some benefits. It's a colossal infrastructure project. 25,000 jobs will be created, 900 of those permanent. But the real issue here is about keeping the lights on. This is about cleaner, greener, secure energy in the future at an acceptable cost. This project does look mightily expensive at the moment, but it's when it starts generating that we should really judge it.
Joel, thank you. England and Wales' most overcrowded train services have been named and shamed today. The Department of Transport has published the annual rail passenger figures for the last spring and autumn. The 7 a.m. Brighton to Bedford service was the busiest peak train service. 6 of the 10 most overcrowded services were trains going in and out of London. Well, to see how busy your service is, just go to itv.com/news. President Obama has thrown his weight behind the woman he hopes will make history and succeed him at the White House. His speech was a powerful endorsement of Hillary Clinton. 8 years ago, he defeated her in the race to stand as the Democrats' candidate. Well, this time he said she was simply better qualified than anyone to be the next president. And as if to underline that, Mr. Obama rounded on Donald Trump, calling on Americans to reject cynicism and reject fear. Our correspondent Robert Moore reports from the convention.
You can greatly admire this president, or you can be disappointed by him. But few would deny the power of this moment. Barack Obama was passing the torch to a former rival, urging Americans to elect her as his successor.
There has never been a man or a woman, not me, not Bill, nobody, more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as President of the United States of America.
And he said that the incendiary language of Donald Trump would never defeat true American values.
That's why anyone who threatens our values, whether fascists or communists or jihadists or homegrown demagogues, will always fail in the end.
And then President Obama ridiculed the very idea that America was diminished and weak.
America is already great. America is already strong. And I promise you, our strength, our greatness, does not depend on Donald Trump.
There was nostalgia too. Never again will he command a TV audience of tens of millions. So it was, in part, a farewell.
Time and again, you've picked me up. And I hope sometimes I picked you up too. The audacity of hope. America, you've vindicated that hope these past 8 years. And now I'm ready to pass the baton and do my part as a private citizen. So this year, in this election, I'm asking you to join me to reject cynicism and reject fear and to summon what is best in us to elect Hillary Clinton as the next president of the United States.
The president has done all he can here. He has been the ultimate character witness. But now it is up to Hillary herself to win over Middle America.
And as she came on stage to embrace President Obama, that is the challenge ahead of her. To overcome the deep-seated doubts among many Americans over her honesty and integrity. Tonight she will give her own primetime speech, nothing less than her pitch to become America's 45th president. Robert Moore, ITV News, Philadelphia.
And still to come this lunchtime. An anniversary present to remember, with a little help from some theatre students. But first, a health warning, and if you or your loved ones work in an office, it concerns you. Anyone who sits down for 8 hours a day could be condemning themselves to an early death. A major study published today says long periods of just sitting, like desk workers often do, significantly increases the risk of an early death. But you can cancel all of that out with just 1 hour's exercise a day. Well, Damon Green's been to an office in Liverpool that is already a hive of healthy activity.
Let's come away from our desks, from our chairs. Time for yoga.
11 o'clock, and in this office it's time to stop work and take some exercise. Everyone in the room, from the managing director to the newest trainee, has to get their mat out and do some yoga. This firm in Liverpool does more than most to ensure its employees don't just sit still at their desks all day. Experts say that leads to stress, which can damage people's health.
If you're sat at a desk, or you're working hard, or you're driving, or whatever it is that you're doing, those stress hormones, that adrenaline, that cortisol, all those things churning around, even kind of sugar and fat your body pumps around your system, it just stays there and it builds and builds and builds.
Scientists analysed the habits of more than 1 million men and women worldwide, mostly over the age of 45. They found that sitting for more than 8 hours a day without exercise increases the chance of an early death by up to 60%. Statistically, that makes office work more dangerous than smoking. But just 1 hour's physical activity a day eliminates that link between sitting time and death. In this workplace, people are encouraged to get up from their desks and play table tennis whenever they feel in a rut. The boss says it makes his workers happier, more creative and more productive.
Health is wealth. If you've got a healthy team creating great work, who are never off sick, that enjoy coming to work, inevitably that reflects into what you produce and the relationship that you have with your clients and the brand that inevitably we're all looking to build.
The evidence shows something as simple as a place to put your bike so you can cycle to work can have an impact on the health of the workforce and how likely you are to come into the office rather than call in sick. Damon Green, ITV News, in Liverpool.
There's no inactivity in Team GB's training camp ahead of the Olympics. The Games kick off in Rio next week, and all of this week we're assessing the chances of some of Britain's top athletes. The Welsh swimmer Jazz Carlin is one of them, and for her the wait to compete's been a long one. She missed out on 2012 because she was struck down with glandular fever during her training. Well, our sports correspondent Ian Payne is with me. That particular swim, vital.
That was absolutely crucial, Alistair. That was at the Olympic trial in April. She'd already failed to qualify for Rio in 2 of her events, but she finally did it in her very last event. She did it by the skin of her teeth, and she was absolutely emotional about it. And as you say, it was more intense because in 2012, when she tried to qualify, she was struck down by glandular fever. And when I spoke to her, she told me what that horrible year was like.
I was getting tonsillitis every 2 to 3 weeks, and I would be in bed just sleeping the whole weekend. And so I had a blood test and obviously found out that I did have glandular fever. And I think when you give everything into your sport, sometimes illness, injury, it's just out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. So it was quite hard to take, but I obviously knew the Olympic trials were coming up and I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to go to the Olympic trials to see what I could do.
Stellar performer, but really grounded.
Yeah, that's the thing that I noticed about her when you speak to any of her friends and family. She's very self-effacing, she's ruthless in the pool, but she's very generous with her time and often goes back to one of her original swimming clubs in Swindon to help out with the youngsters there, and they're all a little bit in awe of her.
She's just so surprising, and you'd have never have thought that she could just swim so fast. Like, she gets in and then she's just like, where is she? And like everyone like follows her.
You would think like Lisa would be a little bit of arrogance. There's none. Like, she's really lovely.
So she's one of 26 British swimmers going to Rio, and they'll be hoping to do better than London when they only got 3 medals. So they're definitely confident.
Fingers crossed. Ian, thank you. And finally, as anniversary surprises go, Carl Gilbertson's for his wife was pretty memorable. Forget champagne and chocolate. His present to Laura took a little more planning and prompted a fair few tears too. Laura suffers from multiple sclerosis, and Carl wanted to make the day extra special. Sharon Thomas on how he did it.
The traditional gift for a 10th anniversary is tin. Laura Gilbertson got a flower and a flash mob. Husband Carl told her they were going to visit family in Liverpool city centre. Instead, he'd arranged for a flash mob of singers to surprise his wife.
I was far more nervous on Saturday than I was on my wedding day. You're in the middle of town on a Saturday afternoon. You don't know whether people are going to take to it, but it was just incredible.
Carl enlisted the help of a colleague and her media students who rehearsed for months. Laura, who has multiple sclerosis, was moved to tears.
It was just seeing her reaction, because that's what obviously you do it for. It was the full-on reaction as well, wasn't it? I think that's what got to people.
Many of the couple's wedding guests were in the crowd to hear the choir sing Bruno Mars' Just the Way You Are. The choir reluctantly took a fee, but have donated it to an MS charity.
We've had a couple of kind of direct messages as well from a couple of people who've got MS, and there was one lad who I was emailing last night because he said that he's going through a particularly bad time, and this has inspired him.
As for Carl, he hasn't ruled out planning a similar stunt for his next big anniversary. Sharon Thomas, ITV News.
There are good people out there. Good afternoon to you.